Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new top 5 list segment. So since the preseason, everyone has been asking for some top 5 lists for the mid lane so that they have a better idea of what to play and just overall what is strong. So I thought I would start things off with the top 5 AP mid mages because I feel like this is still the more popular type of playstyle in the mid lane at the moment. On top of that, I decided to try something a little bit new in this video by giving you guys just a rough idea of what kind of items, runes, and masteries you should be running on each of the champions that I talk about. So if you enjoy the items, runes, and masteries that I add in this video and want me to do it for the future videos as well, let me know in the comments and by liking the video as well. But again guys, do not forget, this list is again mainly my opinion mixed with what really is just strong through statistics. And there is going to be one honorable mention at the end of the video. But let's not waste any more time and go right to the number 5 spot. So starting things off is going to be Syndra. Now what I love about the number 5 spot is that I feel like it is sort of a wild card spot and I can truly put almost anything I want here, and well, Syndra just happens to be that champion that I want to include. She's been under the radar for quite some time, but I do feel like it's time to finally bring this disgustingly strong laner back into the action. One of the great things I love about her is because she does have a fantastic laning phase, being one of the only champions to be able to use an ability while still moving, and the meta currently is all about the laning phase, or at least mainly about the laning phase. So winning the laning phase now is even more important just because of how snowbally games can really be. But on top of that, I also feel like she fits quite well with the Thunderlord's mastery, something that I've personally been saying is really strong ever since the masteries got changed, even though everyone was thinking that Deathfire was going to be the strongest thing. Because really, worst comes to worst, if you miss every single ability somehow with Syndra, you can just use your ultimate and that's a free Thunderlord's proc right there. And well, speaking of her ultimate, if you use it correctly and use 6 balls for it, well, you're gonna have among the highest ultimate damaging abilities in the game at level 6 and really just throughout the game in general. Her E ability has also been fixed to the point where now it just works much more fluidly, it doesn't feel wonky, and it just does what it does better. And I really do think it is time to slowly bring Syndra back into the meta. Unfortunately, the cons of Syndra is, well, she has no built-in escape, even though I do think her E ability sort of makes up for that. Her ultimate is very easily countered by a Zhonya's, and this one might be just a personal pet peeve, but I feel like her W animation and just how the ability works is really slow compared to how everything else in her kit works. And the final thing to mention are of course the runes, items, and masteries, giving you a rough idea of how you want to run Syndra. I will not be talking about what I chose to do with either of these in depth here because I'll save that for other videos, but again, this is to give you a rough idea. But let's move into the number 4 spot where we are going to be talking about Lux. So this was actually a very difficult spot for me to decide, and it was between Lux and Ahri, and clearly Lux is the victor. But we do have Ahri listed in the honorable mentions at the end of the video. So let's talk about Lux. Why do I think she's good? Well, again, as always, she is among the safest of mid laners, so chances of her dying and having the enemy opponent in the mid lane to snowball against you are very low compared to most mages. But the cool thing is the fact that even though you are anti-snowball for the person you're laning against if you play correctly, well, Lux actually snowballs herself quite well. Because you can either start with the Dark Seal, the new item, or you can get it as your second item after the Doran's Ring, and then of course transform that into a Mejai's, and it overall just works very well with how Lux's playstyle is. She can easily proc Thunderlords with her full combo, already complementing a very strong combo as it is, or go for the Storm Raider Surge to give her that extra safety that she may need sometimes. But all in all, I do feel like Lux is an anti-snowballer while being snowbally herself thanks to how safe she is because of the long range on her abilities. She has fantastic catch potential with her Q, especially now that it deals full damage to both targets. Her W is literally Summoner's Spell Barrier, but you can apply it to yourself and your team. And just a very solid champion that has a lot of control, a ton of damage, very safe, and overall just snowballs quite well while preventing the enemy team from snowballing as hard as they may want to. For everyone watching this video, if you play assassins and you've laned against a Lux, you should know exactly what I'm talking about. Now the cons of this girl are the fact that she is purely skill shot oriented. Literally every single ability she has is a skill shot. And if someone finally does get on top of you, you don't have any hard escapes, though you do have the defensive Summoner Spell and Barrier. Let's also quickly dive into what kind of runes, masteries, and items you most likely want to get when playing Lux. I put in a Luden's Echo in the items section because it depends on whether or not you want Luden's Echo or Zhonya's Hourglass, just maybe how well you're doing or how much help you might need. And finally moving into the top 3 mages of this current patch, with the first one being Olivia. She's another champion that more or less graduated from my top 5 underrated list and made it all the way into the number 3 spot in the actual top 5 list. So one of the main reasons Olivia is so strong, on top of just actually having a very solid kit to the point where I don't understand why she's only being flavor of the month right now, is because Rod of Ages did get buffed, while many of the other AP items, such as the one that built from needlessly large rod, got somewhat nerfed. So Olivia is one of those few mages that just absolutely loves building Rod of Ages, and I guess this is her time to shine. So she's known to be the definition of a control mage, probably even more so than Lux. But on top of that, she also has absolutely disgusting damage on her E ability, assuming of course you do apply the frost effect on your target before. She also has what I consider to be personally one of the best passives in the game, essentially having a free Guardian's Angel. I mean, yeah, some people might argue Aatrox's is better, but Olivia's, if you do revive, does give you a lot more stats upon revival. But one really cool thing about Olivia that I like is the fact that she can work very well with either Thunderlords and a Deathfire, and you can even go as far as to use Storm Raider Surge on her and still have a lot of success. She's very flexible in that sense, and that's always a good thing in League of Legends. Her Q ability can hit the same target 2 times as well, which is a huge plus if you use it correctly. Her ultimate being consistent damage within an area. If you put it in a choke point or something like that, it can be absolutely devastating, especially if you have something like Deathfire Touch, or if you have Thunderlords, well, a couple seconds of your ultimate and that's easily procced. But I have to admit that without question, the thing that makes Olivia, well, Olivia, is her W being one of the best abilities in the game, bar none. This ability, honestly, if used correctly and to its fullest, can be disgustingly strong, as you saw right there on the brand, splitting up teams within a team fight, preventing them from escaping, helping yourself and your team escape choke points as well, and it truly just has infinite amount of uses. Now the cons of this Ice Bird is the fact that she does take a bit longer to get going than many of the other champions in the mid lane at the moment, especially the ones that we mentioned. She is a very slow type champion, so she can't really roam super well, and she also has a very unique playstyle, so she's not a champion you can pick up and just do well with instantly. So what kind of build do you want to run on Olivia? Well, again, a very rough idea is as you see on your screen right now. The combination of Rod of Ages and the Archangel Staff is quite deadly, and I personally think is very, very strong. Other than that, it should be somewhat self-explanatory based on what I've said earlier. And now the top 2 spots, I think without question, are the best champions as of right now, with the number 2 spot going to Brand, but I have to say it was really close to putting Brand in the number 1 spot. I mean, if there was ever a patch for this guy to shine on, well, it just has to be this one right here. So not only is he just an absolute bully if you use your W correctly, and eventually once you get all 3 abilities, you can just walk up to your opponent, line of sight them with the minions, use the E ability, land the W, go for the Q, or you can go for the E into the Q into the W, or you can even start with the Q and then use the E and W. It really doesn't matter all that much. You can also even use your abilities to set the minions ablaze with your passive, and then use your E ability to transfer the passive from the minions to the enemy champion you're laning against, because a lot of them will forget about it. But Brand is a champion that heavily relies on his abilities, so the more often you can throw them out, the much better he will be. So 45% CDR is making that even better, and you can stun the same target over and over and over. But then you can combine something like Deathfire Touch, Brand's passive, Rylai's, and even Ignite, and you have 4 things essentially ticking away at your target, dealing one way or another more damage. And if you decide to even go for Liandry's Torment, well, that's even more dot damage and just annoyance. His Q ability is a 2-second flat out stun, which is great for the earlier parts of the game. Huge base damage on his abilities, good wave clear, and his ultimate, as Riot has finally fixed it a few patches ago, just overall works and functions better as an ability. Brand right now, if you're laning against someone that actually understands how to play Brand, I tell you right now, you should be a little scared, because when you least expect it, he will do a ridiculous amount of damage to you. Now the cons of this seemingly unconnable, I don't know if that's even a word, champion, is the fact that he does need 2 abilities to actually stun your target versus many other champions like Twisted Fate for instance, who only need one ability, which is actually the same con as Syndra. And the other problem is the fact that like many of the other champions, he has no escape in his kit, which obviously in certain times can be a big issue. But luckily for Bran, if you play him correctly and you're not behind, well, you don't really need an escape, because if you're put in the situation where normally you would need to escape, pop your ultimate, use your abilities, throw on the ignite, and chances are you just got a double kill. Now let's take a quick look at what kind of items, runes, and masteries you want to be running when playing this guy. There's definitely a few options in terms of how you want to build him, like maybe removing the Yandris for Abyssal or Zanyas, but again, a rough idea of how it can look like. And finally, the number one spot, without much surprise, is going to Twisted Fate. This guy has always been one of the more feared champions in solo queue just because of how much presence he has around the map, and well, that has not changed. He's still going to be continued to be a very strong champion. So like I mentioned earlier, with the Rod of Ages changes and it being an actually pretty strong item now, Twisted Fates have also adapted to this and started building this item, and it works quite surprisingly well on him. I feel like eventually almost every single AP champion with mana, of course, is going to be building this item, but it's still a little early to tell. So why Twisted Fate in the number one spot? Well, first of all, the Lichbane changes have made it even better for him, because again, the AP you gain is, from what I remember, the exact same, but he now gains CDR. And if you have not already guessed, CDR is a fantastic stat on Twisted Fate, because you want to be using your abilities more often, you want to use your ultimate more often, and this just complements his kit overall. He can easily proc Thunderlords with an auto attack W with his Q as well, even better with his E ability if it's activated, but without question he can also go Storm Raider Surge, because the extra move speed on a champion like Twisted Fate, who in my opinion I always call the ADC champion for mid lane, is very reliant on his positioning, so you want to make sure you're always positioned in the right and correct area. His Q ability, like I always say, does do full damage to every single person it hits rather than having diminishing effects, near global ultimate to dictate how the flow of the solo queue game can go. And truthfully, Twisted Fate just went from being a very strong champion to potentially an even stronger champion with the changes of the preseason. Now the cons of Twisted Fate is that he does have a subpar laning phase, because there's a lot of champions that can easily bully him as long as they know what they're doing. He also has no hardened escape, so getting onto him and killing him can be somewhat of an easy task, and he does rely on his longish cooldown spells of his rotation, such as using your W, landing it on the target, throwing your Q, and then running around for 3 seconds in a circle until you can do it all again, which is why the CDR stat is just so important. Let's take that quick look at the items, runes, and masteries for Twisted Fate as well. With this and blue buff, you'll have exactly 45% CDR, and that could be very strong on him, like I said earlier. Other than that, it should be quite straightforward. And before this video ends off, there's an honorable mention for Ahri, because again, most people probably expected to see her on this list, but I decided not to put her. I feel like it's been more or less a fact now that Ahri is just simply a well-rounded champion that you can almost never go wrong in picking. So not only do I want to make room for other champions, but I also feel like Ahri is such a very average type champion that she doesn't necessarily excel in this patch, nor is she bad either. So I do think that Lux potentially is a better option than Ahri, though again, if I had to list both of them, they would both be at the number 4 spot. It's just a matter of making room for other champions. But taking a quick look at Ahri, I mean, she does have great potential with her E ability as always, decent wave clear with her Q. She can proc Thunderlords very easily with her W, since that is essentially 3 spells. And I mean, overall, this champion is still absolutely fantastic, and again, picking her is absolutely the correct move regardless, and you can't really go wrong ever in picking Ahri. So thought I would just more or less clear that up, and again, give her an honorable shout out that she definitely deserves. But that is about it for this episode, guys. If you did enjoy this one, definitely remember to hit that like button to support me. If you did enjoy it and enjoyed seeing all those runes, masteries, and items, and you want to see that more in the future, again, tell me in the comments below and or like the video to show your support. Make sure to share this with your friends so that everyone has a good idea of what maybe they should be playing right now in the mid lane. I'll have the other top 5s coming out somewhat soon as well, and I thank each and every one of you for watching this one, and I hope to see you for the next episode. Peace.